They say the Appalachian Trail is a place to find yourself. But for those who walk the deep, quiet zones between Tennessee and North Carolina, it's a place where you hope nothing finds you. There is one unspoken rule among the veterans who've hiked all 2,000 miles of this American wilderness. Never look up. It sounds like a joke until you're 10 miles from the nearest road and the birds suddenly stop singing. You'll feel a weight on the back of your neck, a cooling of the air. You'll hear a voice, maybe even your own voice, calling from the branches 30 feet above. If you value your life, you'll keep your eyes on the dirt and keep walking. Because once you make eye contact with what lives in the canopy, you aren't a hiker anymore. You're a statistic. It started near mile marker 200, just outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I found a high-end DSLR camera, a $1,200 piece of equipment, just sitting on a mossy log. No bag, no owner, just the cold metal and glass. On the Appalachian Trail, you don't just leave $1,000 lying in the mud unless you left in a hurry. I picked it up, expecting to find vacation photos of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Instead, the memory card was full of 64 identical shots of the exact same patch of sky, blue, cloudless, and empty, until I got to the last photo. It was taken at 3 a.m. The flash had gone off. It showed something pale, multi-jointed, and impossibly thin looking down from a hemlock tree. I shouldn't have taken that camera, but curiosity is a heavy weight. I hiked 5 miles into the green tunnel, the sun disappearing behind the dense canopy. In the US, we call this the green tunnel because the trees are so thick you can't see the sky. It's beautiful in the light, but as the shadows grew to 6 or 7 feet long, the tunnel felt like a throat. I checked my GPS, a $300 Garmin unit I'd trusted for years. The needle wasn't just spinning, it was vibrating. I was at an elevation of 5,000 feet, but the device claimed I was 300 feet below sea level. The trail beneath my boots felt soft, like the earth hadn't been stepped on in a century. Then came the sound. It wasn't a growl or a snap of a twig. It was the sound of a zipper. A tent zipper sliding up and down, over and over. It was coming from the trees. I stopped dead in my tracks. I didn't have a tent. I was planning to stay at the next shelter 3 miles ahead. I looked at the ground, remembering the rule. The sound changed. Now it was the sound of my own heavy breathing, played back to me like a recording, but coming from 15 feet above my head. It was perfectly synchronized with my heart rate. I started walking faster, my boots thudding against the dirt. The sound in the trees followed, matching my pace, step by step, branch by branch. I entered what hikers call a quiet zone. In these pockets of the Appalachian wilderness, the wind doesn't blow, the insects don't chirp. It's an acoustic vacuum. My own footsteps sounded like gunshots in the silence. I reached for my bear spray, a $500 canister of protection, but my hand was shaking so hard I dropped it. As it hit the forest floor, it didn't make a sound. No thud, no clink. It was as if the forest had swallowed the noise before it could reach my ears. I realized then that I wasn't just in the woods anymore. I was inside something's territory, and it was observing me from a vantage point I wasn't allowed to see. A mile later, I found a trail shelter, a 3-sided wooden shack. Inside, there's usually a logbook where hikers sign their names and trail handles. I opened the rusted metal box. The last entry was from 3 hours ago. It said, "It's been following me since the 4,000-foot mark. It doesn't want my food. It wants my attention. If you find this, please don't look up. Just run to the next town." The signature was smudged with something dark and sticky. I looked at the floorboards. There were deep gouges in the wood, like something had tried to pull the entire shelter into the sky. I checked my map. The nearest town was 12 miles away. 12 miles of darkness.
Night fell with a weight I've never felt in the city. Out here, 50 miles from the nearest streetlight, the darkness is absolute. I turned on my headlamp, a 1,000 lumen beam. It should have cut through the night, but the fog was so thick it was like shining a light against a white wall. That's when the whistling started. A cheerful, melodic tune. It was the Star-Spangled Banner, but the notes were slightly off, the pitch sliding up and down like a broken record. It was coming from the canopy of a massive white pine tree. I felt the urge to shine my light upward. My thumb hovered over the power button. "Don't do it," I whispered. The whistling stopped. A voice replied, "Don't do it," in my exact tone of voice. I decided to stay in the shelter. Moving at night on the AT is a death sentence, rule or no rule. I crawled into my sleeping bag, my back against the rear wall. Around midnight, the roof groaned. It wasn't a branch falling. It was a slow, deliberate weight, like a heavy man walking on the wooden shingles. Something was pacing on the roof of the shack, just 3 feet above my head. Then, a long, pale expendage, thinner than a human arm, but longer than a leg, slowly lowered over the front opening of the shack. It dangled there, swaying in the wind like a piece of dead vine. It had no skin, just a translucent membrane over white bone. I knew I had to distract it. I reached into my pack and grabbed my $500 satellite phone. It was my only link to the outside world, but it was also the only thing that made light and noise. I set the alarm to go off in 60 seconds and threw it as far as I could into the woods. The phone tumbled through the darkness and landed in a thicket of laurels. I waited. When the alarm started chirping, a bright digital sound, the weight on the roof vanished instantly. I heard a terrifying screech, a sound like metal tearing, and then the sound of something massive moving through the treetops at incredible speed towards the phone. I didn't wait. I grabbed my pack and ran. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I covered 3 miles in under 40 minutes, my lungs burning in the cold mountain air. I was at the 6,000-foot ridge now. To my left, the world dropped off into a black abyss. To my right, the forest waited. The wind had returned, but it wasn't blowing through the trees. It was blowing out of them. A cold, wet scent hit me, the smell of old copper and wet dog. I looked down at my boots, focusing on the white blazes painted on the trees that marked the trail. Just 10 more miles, I hissed to myself. 10 miles to the road, 10 miles to the light. But the blazes on the trees, they weren't white anymore. They were red.
By mile 12, my $300 leather hiking boots, top-of-the-line Italian-made gear, felt like they were filled with lead. Every step was a struggle against a gravity that felt heavier than it should. I looked down, and for a second, I thought I saw the mud rising up to meet my soles, clinging to the expensive tread like black fingers. I remembered an old story from a ridge runner, the seasonal rangers who patrol the AT. He told me that in the deep holler sections of North Carolina, the ground doesn't just hold your footprint, it tries to hold you. I didn't stop to scrape the mud off. I didn't care about the warranty. I just needed to keep my feet moving before the trail decided I was part of the landscape. The smell of old copper, the scent of fresh blood, became overwhelming near the 1,500-foot descent. In the US, we associate that smell with iron-rich soil or a rusted fence, but out here, it means something had been opened up. I passed a massive boulder, a glacial erratic left behind from the Ice Age. It was covered in a thick, pulsating layer of dark lichen. As I walked past, the lichen didn't just sit there, it shivered. A drop of dark, metallic-smelling liquid fell from an overhanging branch and landed right on my map. It sizzled through the paper, burning a hole straight through the Pisgah National Forest section. Something above me was leaking, and it wasn't water. My $50 headlamp began to pulse. It was a brand new LED, guaranteed for 100 hours, but the beam was shrinking. It turned from a bright white flood to a sickly dim orange. I slapped the side of my head trying to jolt the batteries, but the light just flickered in time with the whistling in the trees. The whistling was closer now. It had moved from the Star-Spangled Banner to a distorted version of Home on the Range. The notes were long, wet, and vibrating. I realized the thing in the canopy wasn't just mimicking sounds. It was learning what made me feel safe and twisting it into a weapon. I turned the light off. Total darkness was better than watching that orange beam die. I reached the 4,000-foot ridge where the trees should have been smaller, stunted by the wind. Instead, they were massive, their branches intertwined like a solid wooden ceiling. This is the Blackwood section, a place where even the local U.S. Forest Service employees won't go after 4 p.m. I felt a sudden drop in pressure, the kind you feel before a massive American thunderstorm. My ears popped. The whistling stopped. In its place was a low-frequency hum that I felt in my teeth. It was the sound of a machine, but there are no machines in the wilderness. It was the sound of the forest breathing through a throat made of wood and static. I saw something hanging from a high branch. It was a bear bag, a $200 waterproof sack hikers use to keep their food away from animals. It was hanging 20 feet up, suspended by high-tensile paracord. But it wasn't swaying. It was being pulled upward, slowly, into the dark needles of a hemlock tree. I heard the sound of plastic tearing and the crunch of granola bars. Then something dropped. Not a wrapper, not a piece of fruit. A single, polished human tooth landed on the trail in front of me. It was clean, no blood, as if it had been surgically removed. I didn't look up to see who or what was eating at the 20-foot mark. I stumbled upon an official U.S. Forest Service sign. Usually, these provide distances to the next spring or campsite. This one had been modified. The wooden board was gouged with deep, frantic claw marks that spelled out a single word: listen. Below it, someone had pinned a $20 bill to the post with a rusty nail. In the U.S., $20 is a safety note, enough for a meal or a ride. But out here, it felt like a bribe, a payment to the woods to let the traveler pass. I reached for the nail, thinking I could use it as a weapon, but the moment my finger touched the cold metal, the sign groaned. It wasn't wood, it was bone, painted to look like a sign. The canopy mimic, that's what the legends call them. They say they can stretch their limbs to 50 feet, thin as a wire, strong as steel. I heard a sound behind me. It was the sound of a camera shutter. It was the almost $1,200 camera I had dropped miles back. Something was behind me, taking my picture. I kept my eyes on my boots. The flash went off, illuminating the forest for a split second. In that strobe light moment, I saw the shadow on the ground in front of me. It wasn't my shadow. It was a shadow with 6 arms, all of them reaching toward my head from the branches above. I started to scream, but the sound that came out of my mouth wasn't mine. It was a bird's chirp. The rain started, a cold Appalachian deluge that turns the trail into a river. I pulled my $100 Gore-Tex rain jacket tight, the fabric hissing as it rubbed against itself. But the rain didn't feel like water. It felt heavy, like oil. It coated my hood, muffling the world even further. I realized the rain was only falling on me. 10 feet to my left, the forest floor was dry. 10 feet to my right, the dust was undisturbed. A localized storm, centered exactly on my coordinates. It was trying to drown my senses, to force me to stop and look up and check the sky for clouds. I gritted my teeth and pushed through the oily downpour, the water tasting like salt and old pennies. I entered a clearing near the Virginia border. In the center was a perfect circle of white stones, each one the size of a human skull. This wasn't natural. This was trail art gone wrong. Inside the circle sat a pile of gear, 3 backpacks, 2 pairs of boots, and a single expensive wedding ring worth at least $2,000. No bodies, no blood, just the items neatly arranged. As I skirted the edge of the circle, I heard a whisper. It wasn't coming from the trees this time. It was coming from the ground. It was the sound of 1,000 voices all saying the same thing in a perfect and terrifying unison. "You're almost home." I finally saw it. Mile marker 1, the beginning of the end. In the US, the 1 is a symbol of a fresh start, but as I approached the post, I saw that the number had been carved out and replaced with a 0. 0 miles to go. I looked at the road ahead, just 100 feet away. I could see the asphalt, the yellow lines, the safety of civilization. But between me and the road stood the largest oak tree I've ever seen. Its branches didn't just reach for the sky, they reached for the road. The whistling returned, louder than ever, a deafening rendition of Amazing Grace. The road was right there. I just had to walk under that tree without looking up. One last test of the rule. My boots hit the asphalt of the Blue Ridge Parkway. In the US, we think of roads as borders, a line between the wild and the civilized. I felt the heat rising from the pavement, even at midnight. I didn't look back at the 0 mile marker. I didn't look up at the oak tree that arched over the road like a claw. I just stared at the double yellow lines, those bright $100-a-gallon paint stripes that lead back to town. But the road was silent. No hum of distant tires, no wind, just the sound of my own heart and the faint, rhythmic of something long and thin tapping against the guardrail behind me. I reached my SUV, a $40,000 investment in safety. I fumbled with my key fob, the little plastic button feeling like the most important object in the world. The lights flashed, cutting through the Appalachian fog for a split second. I dived inside and slammed the door, locking it instantly. The interior smelled like expensive leather and old coffee. Civilization. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was safe. I had a steel cage, a V8 engine, and a full tank of gas. But as I reached for the rear-view mirror to adjust it, I stopped. If I looked at the mirror, I'd see the roof. And if I saw the roof, I might see what was sitting on it. I started the engine. The roar of the motor felt like a shield. I punched home into the $1,500 navigation system. The screen flickered, the blue light washing over the cabin. "Calculating route," the digital voice said. But the map didn't show the Blue Ridge Parkway. It showed a green void. A single icon, my car, was moving across a blank screen. "In 500 feet, the voice whispered. "Look up." My blood turned to ice. That wasn't the factory-setting voice. It was the same pitch, the same artificial tone, but the words were wrong. I ripped the power cord out of the dash, but the screen stayed lit. "In 200 feet, look up." I drove for 50 miles, never exceeding 30 miles per hour. I couldn't risk a breakdown. I pulled into an Exxon station near the Virginia border. In the US, these stations are beacons of safety. Bright lights, $4-a-gallon gas, and cheap coffee. But the fluorescent lights were humming with that same low-frequency vibration I'd heard in the woods. The pumps were all locked. I looked at the window of the convenience store. Inside, the shelves were stocked. The open sign was lit, but there was a thin layer of fine white powder, the same dust from the abandoned backpack, covering everything. On the glass, someone had traced a circle. Inside the circle, in the dust, were the words, "He is on the roof." I needed to get on the interstate. I reached the toll booth for the mountain bypass. In this part of the country, it's a $5 toll. I rolled down the window just an inch, my hand shaking as I held out a $5 bill. The booth was empty, but a pale, elongated hand reached out from the shadows of the collection window. It didn't take the $5.
It reached past the money and touched the roof of my car, its fingers clicking against the metal like dry bone. I dropped a $100 bill into the coin basket and floored the accelerator. I didn't wait for change. I didn't look at the hand. I just drove until the smell of copper was replaced by the smell of burning rubber. I made it to the suburbs of Asheville. Rows of $500,000 homes, manicured lawns, and streetlights every 50 feet. This is the American dream, the ultimate safe zone. I pulled into my driveway, the motion sensor lights snapping on. The bright white floods illuminated my brick house. I felt a wave of relief. The forest was 20 miles behind me. The Appalachian Trail was someone else's problem now. I stepped out of the car, my boots clicking on the clean concrete. But as I walked toward my front door, I noticed something. The motion lights weren't looking at me. They were all swiveled upward, aimed at the dark peaks of my roof. I went straight to my security monitor. I'd spent $1,500 on a high-definition 4K camera system, the Guardian package. I pulled up the live feed on my tablet. The front yard was empty. The driveway was clear. I started scrolling through the motion events from the last 10 minutes. There was one event labeled Unidentified Motion at 12:05 a.m. I clicked play. The video showed me pulling in. It showed me getting out and running for the door. But in the 4K clarity of the night vision, I saw it. Attached to the roof of my SUV was a shape so thin it looked like a shadow, its limbs wrapped around the luggage rack. As I closed the front door, the shape didn't follow me. It detached and crawled up the brick siding of my house, moving like a spider toward the attic vent. I sat in my kitchen, a $1,000 marble-top island that suddenly felt like a tomb. The sound was coming from directly above me, the attic. In U.S. homes, the attic is where we store our past, old photos, Christmas decorations, things we forget. I looked at the ceiling. The drywall was bulging, not from water, but from weight. A long, thin crack began to form in the white paint. A fine white powder, the dust of the trail, began to sift down, landing in my expensive coffee. I remembered the rule, never look up. But I was in my home, my castle, my safe zone. The rule wasn't supposed to apply here. I grabbed my $2,000 home defense shotgun from the safe. In the US, we believe a weapon makes us the master of our domain. I aimed it at the ceiling. "I know you're up there," I yelled. My voice sounded thin, like a recording. The scratching stopped. A voice replied from the attic, using the exact same tone, the exact same artificial tone, but the words were wrong. I ripped the power cord out of the dash, but the screen stayed lit. "I know you're up there." Then the whistling started again. Amazing grace. It was coming through the air vents, the sound vibrating through the steel ductwork. The thing wasn't just in my house, it was in the systems of my house. It was in the walls, the vents, and the wiring. I realized then that the Appalachian Trail doesn't end at the trailhead. It follows the roads. It follows the wires. It follows the people who break the rules. I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator, a $3,000 appliance. I didn't see my face. I saw the ceiling behind me. The attic hatch was open. A long, thin, multi-jointed limb was reaching down, its fingers hovering just inches above my head. I closed my eyes. I looked at the floor, and I whispered the only thing that could save me. "I am not looking. I am not looking." The whistling reached a deafening crescendo, and then silence. The quiet zone had finally reached the suburbs.
I stepped out onto my front porch, clutching my $2,000 shotgun. My neighborhood, a quiet $600,000 per home development in North Carolina, should have been humming with the sounds of a summer night. AC units buzzing, the distant roar of the I-26 highway, maybe a dog barking at a squirrel. But there was nothing. No wind, no crickets. The silence was so heavy it felt like physical pressure against my eardrums. I looked at my neighbor's house, a beautiful Victorian-style build. Every light was on, but the windows were vibrating, not from the wind, but from a frequency so low it was making the glass hum like a tuning fork. The quiet zone hadn't just followed me, it had colonized the entire street. I reached for my $1,000 flagship smartphone, desperate to call the police. The screen was a chaotic mess of static and scrolling code. It wasn't a software glitch. It was as if the phone was trying to process a signal it wasn't built to understand. I tried to dial 911, but the keypad was missing the number 9. In its place was a symbol that looked like a twisted, multi-jointed limb. I threw the phone onto the lawn. As it hit the grass, it didn't make a sound. It just sank into the green blades like they were made of liquid. My connection to the $50 billion US cellular network was gone. I was 10 miles from a major city, but I was as isolated as I had been at the 6,000-foot ridge of the trail. I began to walk toward the neighborhood park, the Oak Ridge Greenbelt. In the US, we build these parks to give families a taste of nature. Now that taste was turning bitter. The entrance sign, a $5,000 sandblasted redwood monument, had been snapped in half. The wood didn't look broken, it looked chewed. I followed the paved path, my boots clicking on the expensive recycled rubber surface. The playground equipment, the $20,000 plastic and steel slides, were covered in that same fine white powder from the trail. It was falling from the sky like snow, but there were no clouds. It was falling from the canopy of the suburban maple trees. I found a public emergency phone near the park's entrance, a blue light tower provided by the city. I hit the button. A voice finally answered. It was a dispatcher, but she sounded miles away, as if she were shouting from the bottom of a well. 911, what is your look-up location? She asked. I froze. I'm at Oak Ridge Park. There's something on my roof. Something is in the trees. The line went dead for a second. Then the voice returned, but it wasn't the dispatcher anymore. It was the sound of a tent zipper. It was coming through the speaker of the emergency phone. The quiet zone was now using the city's own infrastructure to find me. I decided to check on the Millers. They lived in a $750,000 smart home, completely automated, cameras in every room. I approached their front door. It was wide open. I could see their $4,000 Samsung TV playing a sitcom in the living room, but the sound was muted. I stepped inside. On the kitchen counter sat 2 plates of dinner still steaming and a $100 bottle of Napa Valley wine. No struggle, no blood, just 2 empty chairs and a pair of $200 all-weather slippers sitting neatly on the rug. I looked at the ceiling. The same jagged crack I'd seen in my own house was here, running like a lightning bolt across the expensive crown molding. The powder was everywhere. Suddenly, the power grid for the entire county failed. In the US, we take for granted the constant hum of the grid. When it dies, the silence is deafening. One by one, the street lights, those $2,000 apiece sodium vapor lamps, flickered and died. The neighborhood was plunged into a darkness that felt older than the mountains. I looked toward the horizon, expecting to see the glow of Asheville or Charlotte. Nothing. The city lights were gone. It was as if the Appalachian forest had reached out and smothered the electricity of the entire state. I reached for my $200 tactical flashlight. I clicked it on. The beam was purple, not white, not yellow, pure, sickly ultraviolet. Then the car alarm started. It began with a $60,000 Tesla down the street, then a $30,000 Ford, then a $50,000 Jeep, 100 cars all screaming at once. In the US, a car alarm is a sign of theft. Here, it was a distraction. The alarms weren't just beeping, they were playing in a rhythmic pattern. It was the same tune from the woods, Amazing Grace.
100 car horns and sirens perfectly synchronized, blasting the melody into the silent night. The sound was so loud it was shaking the leaves off the trees. I covered my ears, the $2,000 shotgun slipping from my hands. They wanted me to look at the cars. They wanted my eyes on the ground so I wouldn't notice what was happening above. I looked at the white powder on the hood of the Jeep. Up close, it wasn't dust. It was tiny, microscopic fragments of bone, thousands of them. I realized what the canopy mimics were doing. They weren't just eating people, they were processing them, turning them into a fine mist that they could rain down on the next quiet zone. I saw a $50 bill stuck in the grill of the car, coated in the bone dust. Money, tech, security, none of it meant anything to these things. They didn't want our wealth, they wanted our biology. I looked at my own hands. My skin was starting to turn that same translucent pale white I'd seen on the limb in the shelter. The quiet zone was changing me. The purple light of my flashlight hit a nearby oak tree, the same kind of tree from the trail. Under the ultraviolet glow, the tree didn't look like wood, it looked like muscle. The bark was pulsing, and I could see veins of silver liquid flowing upward from the roots. I realized the trees in the suburbs weren't trees at all. They were extensions of the things in the canopy. They were sensors. Every time I had walked my dog or mown my lawn, I'd been touching the fingers of the forest. The $10,000 I'd spent on landscaping over the years had just been a way to feed the mimics. I dropped the flashlight. It shattered, the purple light dying with a hiss. I looked at the end of the street. The asphalt was cracking. Giant 10-foot roots were bursting through the $100,000 a mile pavement, twisting and turning like snakes. The suburbs were being reclaimed. In 40 minutes, I had gone from a through hiker on the AT to a survivor in a dying world. I realized then that the unspoken rule wasn't just for the trail, it was for everywhere, because up wasn't a direction anymore. Up was a hungry mouth, and the quiet zone was its stomach. I turned toward my house one last time. I didn't look up at the roof. I didn't look at the attic vent. I just kept my eyes on the dirt, praying for the sun to rise over the American horizon.
I threw my $40,000 SUV into gear, the tires screaming against the cracked asphalt. In the US, we believe our vehicles are our ultimate freedom, but as I sped away from my neighborhood, the rearview mirror showed the trees closing ranks behind me. The roots weren't just breaking the pavement, they were weaving into a wall, 50 feet high. I pushed the engine to 80 miles per hour, the V8 roaring like a trapped animal. I didn't look up at the overpasses. I didn't look at the high-tension power lines that were vibrating like guitar strings. I just looked at the white lines of the highway, praying they would lead me to the salt air of the coast. I reached I-95, the great concrete artery of the American East Coast. Usually, this highway is a river of $100,000 semi-trucks and vacationing families. Now, it was a graveyard. Miles of abandoned cars sat idling in the breakdown lane, their headlights cutting pathetic holes in the mist. I saw a $150,000 luxury RV tipped on its side, the glass shattered. There were no bodies, just piles of that fine white bone powder on the driver's seats. I swerved around a discarded $100 suitcase that had burst open, spilling colorful summer clothes across 3 lanes of traffic. The quiet zone was moving faster than I was. My car's $2,500 infotainment system suddenly screamed. It wasn't music, it was the sound of 1,000 birds being crushed at once. The scream turned a vibrant, bleeding red. Recalculating, the voice said, but it was layered with the sound of a tent zipper. Zip, zip, zip. The GPS showed I was driving into the ocean, even though I was still 100 miles inland. I realized the mimics weren't just in the trees anymore. They were in the satellites. They were rewriting the map of the United States. I punched the screen, cracking the expensive glass, but the red glow remained, illuminating the interior of my car like a slaughterhouse. I pulled over at a roadside diner near the South Carolina border. A faded sign promised a $20 all-day breakfast. In the US, these diners are the soul of the road. I stepped out, the air smelling of old grease and ozone. The diner's neon open sign was buzzing, but the windows were coated in a thick, translucent slime, the same stuff I'd seen on the limb in the shelter. I looked at the outdoor seating area. A $50 umbrella had been folded in half by something with immense strength. On the table sat a single steaming cup of coffee and a $10 bill, perfectly dry. I didn't go inside. The whistling was coming from the kitchen vents. I crossed into the low country. Here, the Appalachian oaks give way to ancient cypress trees and Spanish moss. In the US, we find the moss romantic, but tonight it looked like hanging hair. The road turned into a 2-lane bridge over a dark, brackish swamp. I rolled the window down an inch. The smell of salt was there, but it was mixed with the smell of wet copper. The water below was perfectly still, reflecting the moon like a $1,000 mirror. Then I saw the ripples. Something 50 feet long was moving just beneath the surface, keeping pace with my car. It wasn't an alligator. It was too thin, too articulated. I reached the coast, a small, wealthy island off the coast of Georgia. I found a $150,000 a year rental property, a stilt house built right on the dunes. I figured the height would save me. If the mimics lived in the canopy, maybe they couldn't handle the open sand and the salt spray. I climbed the wooden stairs, my $300 boots echoing on the planks. Inside, the house was a masterpiece of coastal design. White linens, driftwood furniture, and $5,000 floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the Atlantic. I locked the door and sat on the floor, staring at the waves. The ocean was the only thing that wasn't quiet. The waves were the only sound left in the world. I watched the tide come in. They say salt is a purifier. I hoped the mimic's translucent skin would shrivel in the brine. I looked at the beach through my $500 binoculars. The sand was white, but not from shells. It was covered in that same bone powder, millions of fragments being washed out to sea. I saw a $200 surfboard standing upright in the sand, abandoned. Behind it, a trail of thin, 3-fingered prints led from the dunes straight into the surf. They weren't afraid of the water. They were using it. The ocean wasn't a barrier. It was a highway that led to every coast in the world. A light appeared on the horizon, a rhythmic flash, the U.S. Coast Guard signal from a distant cutter. It was a $500 million ship, a symbol of American maritime power. I felt a surge of hope, but as I watched, the rhythm changed. The flashes became longer, wetter. It wasn't Morse code anymore. The ship was flashing amazing grace in ultraviolet light. Then the light didn't just go out, it was pulled down. The entire ship, 400 feet of steel and technology, was dragged beneath the waves in less than 10 seconds. No explosion, no sound, just a ripple in the $1,000 mirror of the Atlantic. I looked toward the island's lighthouse, a 150-foot brick monument to safety. The beacon was spinning, but the light was a sickly, pulsating silver. As it swept over the beach house, I saw them. Not one, not two, but hundreds. They were clinging to the stilts of the houses, their long, pale limbs wrapped around the wood like barnacles. They weren't looking up anymore. They were looking at me through the $5,000 windows. Their eyes, if you could call them that, were just twin reflections of the lighthouse beam. They had followed the trail, they had followed the road, and now they had followed the tide. I reached into my pocket and found a single crumpled $100 bill. It was the last of my American currency, the last symbol of the world I knew. I placed it on the driftwood coffee table. I didn't know why. Maybe it was a tip for the cleaners who would never come. Or maybe it was a burial shroud for the quiet zone. I heard the glass of the floor-to-ceiling window crack. Not a shatter, but a slow, deliberate pop. A single thin finger, translucent and cold, began to trace a circle on the glass. I sat back, closed my eyes, and listened to the sound of the ocean and the sound of the whistling coming from the waves. I stood on the balcony of that $1 million stilt house, staring at the Atlantic. In the US, we pay a premium for a view of the horizon because it represents the infinite. But tonight, the horizon was a solid line of silver, not the moon's reflection, but a wall of that translucent, muscular membrane rising out of the deep. It was miles long, stretching from the Georgia coast toward the Carolinas. I looked at the $500 outdoor furniture, now coated in sea salt and bone powder. The ocean wasn't drowning them, it was feeding them. The mimics weren't just forest dwellers, they were the architects of a new world, and they were building a roof over the entire planet. I needed to see above the mist. I grabbed my $2,500 professional drone, a high-tech marvel of American engineering. I launched it from the deck, the 4 rotors buzzing like a trapped hornet. I pushed the joystick, sending it 500 feet into the air. The tablet screen showed the coast receding, the beach houses looking like doll houses. But as the drone reached the 800-foot mark, the video feed didn't show the sky, it showed a ceiling, a vast organic web of pale, pulsating branches that covered the entire state of Georgia. The drone didn't crash, it was simply plucked out of the air by a limb so thin it looked like a strand of spider silk. The house's $50,000 solar battery backup kicked in as the main grid finally dissolved. The interior lights turned a dim emergency amber. In the US, we buy these systems to stay off the grid, but tonight, the grid was the only thing that had kept the quiet zone at bay. I looked at the inverter screen. The power wasn't being used by the fridge or the AC, it was being drained by the walls. I put my ear to the expensive drywall. I could hear the hum of 1,000 voices, a choir of mimics, all vibrating at the same frequency as the 60 Hz American power cycle. They weren't just in the house, they were using my electricity to communicate with the quiet zone in Maine. I found a $10,000 enterprise-grade satellite phone in the house's emergency kit. This was a Tier 1 device, designed to work anywhere from the Sahara to the Antarctic. I dialed a number for a friend in London. A voice picked up. "Hello?" it said. The accent was British, clear and crisp. "Is it happening there too?" I asked. There was a pause. Then the voice began to whistle. Not Amazing Grace, but God Save the King. The same distorted, wet, sliding pitch. I hung up and dialed Sydney, Australia. The response was a recording of a kookaburra played back over the sound of a tent zipper. The quiet zone wasn't a local anomaly, it was a global synchronization. I looked at my $300 tactical watch. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour in US folklore. But the hands weren't moving, they were vibrating. I realized that time in the quiet zone doesn't flow, it pools. 1,000 miles of the East Coast, from the Florida Keys to the Canadian border, was now a single, silent organism. I looked out the window and saw a $200,000 speedboard drifting aimlessly in the surf. It was covered in that translucent slime. The engine was running, but the sound was being muffled, swallowed by the quiet zone before it could travel more than an inch. The world was becoming a silent film, and we were the audience that wasn't allowed to leave. My $5,000 biometric smart lock, the Titanium series, suddenly turned green. In the US, green means access granted, but I hadn't touched the sensor. The heavy oak door didn't swing open, it began to dissolve. The wood fibers were being pulled upward into the doorframe, turning into that pale, bone-white powder. I backed away, my $300 boots silent on the designer rug. A single thin limb, 40 feet long and no thicker than a pencil, threaded its way through the keyhole. It didn't reach for me, it reached for the $100 bill I had left on the coffee table. It picked up the currency with a delicate 3-fingered precision, and then it mimicked the sound of a cash register. Cha-ching! I reached into my bag and found a $50 bill. I held it out like a white flag. "Is this what you want?" I whispered. The whistling stopped.
Every tree on the island, every limb on the beach house, every fiber of the quiet zone seemed to lean in to listen. The $50 bill was snatched from my hand so fast it left a paper cut. A voice, my father's voice, dead 10 years, came from the ceiling. "It's a start," it said. I realized the mimics didn't value the money for its trade power. They valued it because it was a piece of us, our history, our sweat, our value. They were collecting the artifacts of a civilization they were about to erase. I looked at the sky one last time. The silver membrane over the Atlantic was pulsing with a rhythmic ultraviolet light. It looked like a heart, a global heart, beating at the same rate as the quiet zone in the Appalachian woods. I saw a $100 million U.S. Air Force jet fly overhead, its engines silent. As it passed under the silver ceiling, it didn't crash, it was simply absorbed. The metal turned to wood, the fuel turned to sap, and the pilot became part of the whistling. I sat on the floor, surrounded by my $10,000 worth of survival gear, and realized that in the US, we spend our lives buying things to keep the dark away, never realizing the dark is what we're made of. The unspoken rule of the Appalachian Trail, never look up, wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. They wanted us to look down so we would stay busy with our miles, our feet, and our $300 boots. They wanted us to build our $500,000 houses and our $40,000 cars while they built the canopy. I looked at the floorboards of the beach house. They were turning to moss. The quiet zone was complete. I closed my eyes and felt a thin, cold finger touch the back of my neck. It didn't hurt. It felt like a zipper. Zip. My own voice, coming from the ceiling, whispered, "Welcome home, NightNoxis." If you're listening to this in a quiet zone, don't look at the screen. Don't look at the ceiling. Just keep your eyes on the dirt and keep walking, because the trail doesn't end in Maine. It ends when the whistling stops. And the whistling, it never stops. Thank you for walking the trail with Mr. NightNoxis. If you're still here, leave a comment with your safe zone location. We'll see you in the canopy.